Okay, folks, we're back again. It's Friday. You're listening to the Entrepreneurial Web. I'm your host, Jeremiah Fox. Today, I am joined by employment law and business law attorney Eric Sarver. He's based here in New York City, and this guy's got a wealth of knowledge on the ever-changing regulatory situation with COVID-19, with your employees, but also your business. We were just discussing in the last segment a couple of scenarios. You've got an employee that is sick or claiming to be sick, or is even just worried about getting sick, and like, what are some of the appropriate responses, and what are your rights as a business owner, employer, and what are their rights as an employee? And I had asked Eric in that last segment, we didn't get to it, but I'd love for you to pick up on that. And I think this could apply, you probably would know, an apparently not well employee or an apparently not well customer. I mean, we've all seen the crazy videos from like the Midwest where like guys won't wear a mask coming into a store and fighting with employees. What are kind of, we legally bound as business owners to say to, and what kind of appropriate action is there for someone that is apparently sick? I many times played out in my head once they, reopen dining rooms. If I've got, people sitting in my restaurant and somebody starts coughing and hacking up a lung and, everybody's like immediately going to be uncomfortably looking around, and it's going to fall on me to go up to that person. What can I say to them? Or if an employee, same thing. And I'm like, dude, you need to go home. And they're like, I need the money. I got to stay. Like, what can we do in that situation? What's the best response?
Sure. No, it's a great question. And it's one that I have seen as well. I've seen more of the folks that want to stay home, but people that want to come in because they have to work, they've been home, they haven't made a lot of money. Well, first off, you have a right, a legal right, under any law, under the ADA, under the Title VII, which covers age discrimination, or rather race and so forth. And ADA covers age discrimination. But the point I'm making is you have a right as an employer under federal and state laws to send an employee home if they appear sick, right? And if they're, exhibiting symptoms. And so, especially if it's in good faith, and that's, I think, the key issue there. So, and again, talk about documenting. In the earlier segment, I mentioned employees that don't want to come in, document the reasons, right? If there's a disability involved, document the accommodation request. If it's a clean and unsafe work environment, document, show them how you keep the environment safe. Give them a floor plan, but going to your issue now, you have, as a business owner, right, you have an obligation to create a safe working environment, right? So that's, under OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Act. It's under applicable state laws as well. So short answer, Jeremiah, is you can send an employee home if they're appearing sick, and in fact, you're also allowed to take employees' temperatures. So if you're really unsure,
right,
you can say, hey, you know what, come over here, you look kind of feverish, take the temperature, 101 or 100.4 or more. You can say, okay, look, you have a fever, clearly you're not well, go home. And you could also request they come back with a doctor's note. The time people get into trouble is when an employer assumes that an employee is probably not well because of some distinguishing trait. Like, for example, say you've got an employee who is 64 and still working in your company, and you see them clear their throat once or twice, and you kind of automatically assume that, oh, well, they're older and, my God, they might be sick, and even if they're a little sick, they can die, so I'm going to send them right home. So you have to watch out that you're not using sort of disparate, right, standards, like an unequal, excessively harsh standard, or let's say you have an employee, right, who, may have a disability, maybe unrelated to COVID-19. Sometimes people see somebody in a wheelchair or a disability, and they assume that, oh, I heard disabled and more susceptible. Well, some are, like with asthma or diabetes, but some are not. So my advice is you can certainly send somebody home. And in terms of customers also, right, same thing applies. Think of it as if you've got a customer who is exhibiting symptoms, and you can say, hey, listen, you seem pretty sick. I feel comfortable in a restaurant or with you in my place of business. I'd ask you to leave. Same thing with people who are not following, rules around masks or social distancing. But you're right, the tricky situation, because if you ask someone to leave and that person is of Asian descent and they claim you're, selecting them because of their Asian background, you might be facing a discrimination suit. So one other thing I mentioned too is, right, if an employee is coming in, right, it's kind of mind-boggling, right? There's a lot
It
of,
is.
sometimes I feel like my clients, like the way they talk, I feel as if they're experiencing walking through a minefield, landmines, and
Yeah.
do I step here or step there? And again, the law, right, it's meant to protect people, but you're doing the best you can, right, using common sense. So I think, look, if you do send an employee home because they're sick, or you think they're sick, you want to make sure you write out the situation. So,
Mhm.
what about them made you think they were sick? Did other workers express concerns to you? And if so, make sure you have that in writing as well. And
Yeah.
again, just make it very clear that the reason they're being sent home has nothing to do with their gender or their race or their age or their nationality or ability status. So I would say that, and I'd also say one more thing as well about this, which is say the employee that you're sending home, be mindful of what you pay them in your next paycheck, right? Because the longstanding laws around this under the federal and state law, FLSA and New York labor law, says that if you have a salaried employee and they're home, if a part of the week, you have to pay them for that week if they're not paid hourly. If they're an hourly worker and they're covered by certain rules on overtime and you pay them by the hour they're there, it's an interesting dilemma, right? You're allowed to say, look, if you were sick, I thought you were sick, you want to come in, you're not working, I'm not going to pay you for the time you weren't here. And then they don't really have a wage and hour claim, but again, if they claim that you're doing this to retaliate against them for something they did or to try to cheat them out of their money,
Right.
it could get dicey. You might want to just pay them for the day. If it's a week, right, that's a lot of maybe you're losing a lot of money 2 weeks. If it's from they go home at noon and they miss 4 hours, I always advise, you know what, it's a very sticky time, right? You don't want to be a test case. You don't want to be that one that's in the news on every channel and station because like reporters are looking for COVID-19 stories. So
Sure.
send them home and hey, if it helps them to go home and say, listen, go to a doctor, go tomorrow. I'll pay you for today and tomorrow. And you don't have to use your PTO time. It's like you're paying not to have a potential headache and a potential landmine or pitfall situation.
Yeah. Yeah. Big time. No, that's great. That's really excellent advice, especially distinguishing between the salary and the hourly, because I have both.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, that's always a big concern. It's these people that rely on the hours, and that's who I was thinking of. It just that that scenario hadn't happened, but I definitely have a few guys that they're just such hard workers and so dedicated, and they're the breadwinners for their family, and it just every dollar counts, especially right now. I could just see this arising and just how to navigate that, and that's a really great suggestion is to, like you said, negotiate in some way. You said that earlier in the show, like find that negotiation point. Right. Where it's not a battle where they feel serviced in some way, and it's not a personal attack. I think if you show them, that you have their best interest and the the business's best interest in mind, and you might have to pony up a little cash for that, which is not easy these days, but like you said, it might really save you from digging out of a really uncomfortable hole a little later on. What are some other kind of things that you've seen pop up that people have asked you about, unrelated to some of the questions that I've asked? Are there any other things off the top of your head that you feel like employers need to know this during this time?
Yes, that's an excellent segue, I think, into other issues, which are similar. And just if I can just reiterate your point, sometimes a little bit of money now, it shows good faith. I think from the legal, also from the business component of things, right? The psychology of workers, people like to feel that like they're valued more than just the buck or the dollar. So if you do pay them for the day, there's that peace of mind that okay, maybe this person really is concerned about my well-being and not just trying to stiff me out of my shifts, my week. Yeah. So that's a good point, I think, to put in there to make.
Yeah.
Other issues, Jeremiah, that I've seen that I also caution people about include, let's see, well, you've got people who are, say, hiring, right? You've got employees that didn't come back. Maybe they moved or they got sick or they retired early. So when you're hiring, what questions can you and can't you ask, right? And like COVID-19. And if you, let's say, give a candidate a job offer, and then you learn that they might have COVID-19, you can delay their start date, right? You can delay it until they're test negative or they're healthy and covered,
Hmm.
but you can't retract an offer simply based on the COVID-19 status because,
Yeah.
right, it's could be considered disability under disability laws that's being litigated and tested in some arenas right now. There are all kinds of opinions, yay or nay, and we wouldn't even be able to get into all the nuances of that right now. But my point there is that you have to be very mindful of that that situation. So I've seen certainly that matter come up. Right, it's number one. Another issue involves, say, business owners who have employees who are now working from home, and right, let's say they have hourly employees or overtime. It becomes difficult to track employees' hours the same way as when they came into the office, right,
Hmm.
into the workplace. So, maybe you have like say like a restaurant worker who maybe does certain type of functions that they do from home that are obviously not a server or a waiter or a busboy,
Right.
bus person, but so you want to make sure that you're tracking the hours properly. That be mindful if you run a professional service, if you're say a tech company or advertising company, be mindful of sending employees their emails, texts, or phone calls after hours that when you're asking for a response, because what happens then is right you're extending their hours essentially. Maybe they're working more than 40 hours a week, and so they're now entitled to overtime pay. There's an issue we found coming up more and more before COVID-19 with
Hmm.
the onset of commuting, of the onset of telecommuting and telework. No, I think that's certainly an issue that comes up. And I think maybe lastly, let's see, I covered right the employees that are hiring employees with their disability or if they have COVID-19. Um, I'd also say just being mindful of being able to document and demonstrate that you have a safe workplace. And also having employee handbooks that are updated. I really can't stress this enough because, you know, when an employee is surprised by something, they tend to get defensive and react.
Yeah.
If you've got everything I've discussed laid out in an updated, revised employee handbook, and I really, really have been telling all my clients, you need to update your handbooks, the employee manuals. It gives people the lay of the land. They know in advance, like example, if you're sick, you will be sent home or subject to a COVID-19 test or a temperature check. They know that going into the face situation. If you know that you have to have certain CDC guidelines in place, and some of those are challenged with that you didn't, and you can get a copy of the blueprints of your compliance, stick it in the handbook, have people sign off on it. So I've had some of my clients say, you updated my handbook in February this year, which I did because I like to update yearly, but then COVID-19 hit. So I also, just having rather sound policies around safety, having security, having clarity for your employees is really key advice that I give.
Yeah, and that's great. And it's documentation. It's just further documentation, like
Exactly. Yeah.
that they saw it. You have their signature dated that they saw the handbook. These are the policies, so that when something arises, it's not such a surprise. Or even if they get defensive, at least you have that documentation that this employee was aware of this. This was going to be protocol. That this would be the situation, and this is the situation, and then document the situation as well as a double backup. I'm all about reinforced wedges everywhere. So
Absolutely. I think
jujitsu concept. So I said it's a jujitsu concept, and I try to bring it into the workplace in a non-physical fashion.
Right. Yeah.
Metaphorically, of course.
Right.
All right, we're going to take one more quick break. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about some of the other things you have to offer and what your future with talking alternative broadcasting might look like. So hang tight, everybody. One more segment coming up. We'll be back in just a minute.